शुक्लां भरधरं विष्णुं शशिवर्णं चतुर्भुजं प्रसन्नवदनं ध्यायेत् सर्वविघ्नोपशान्तये। ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करभावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः। अगजानन पद्मार्कं गजाननमहर्निशम् अनेकदन्तं भक्तानाम् एकदन्तमुपास्महे। श्रीमहागणपतये नमः। गुरवे सर्वलोकानां विषजे भवरोगिणां निधये सर्वविद्यानां श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। अस्मद्गुरुचरणारविन्दाभ्यां नमः। वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुम्। ज्ञानानन्दमयं देवं निर्मलस्फटिकाकृतिम् आधारं सर्वविद्यानां श्रीहयग्रीवमुपास्महे। श्रीहयग्रीवमूर्तये नमः। सरस्वती नमस्तुभ्यं वरदे कामरूपिणि विद्यारम्भं करिष्यामि सिद्धिर्भवतु मे सदा। श्रीमहासरस्वत्यै नमः। उमाकोमलहस्ताब्जसम्भावितललाटकम् हिरण्यकुण्डलं वन्दे कुमारं पुष्करस्रजं। வெற்றிவேல் முருகனுக்கு ஹரஹரோஹரா. லோகவீரியம் மகாபூஜ்யம் சர்வரக்ஷாகரம் விபும் பார்வதி ஹிருதயானந்தம் சாஸ்தாரம் பிரணமாம்யகம். சுவாமியே சரணமையப்பா. வாகர்த்தாவிவ சம்பிருக்தௌ வாகர்த்த பிரதிபத்தயே जगदः पितरौ वन्दे पार्वती परमेश्वरौ। श्री पार्वती परमेश्वराभ्यां नमः। कोमलं कूजयन् वेणुं श्यामलोऽयं कुमारकः वेदवेद्यं परब्रह्मा तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। अस्मद्गुरुचरणारविन्दाभ्यां नमः। श्रीकृष्ण गोविन्द हरे मुरारे श्रीनाथ नारायण वासुदेव। श्रीकृष्ण गोविन्द हरे मुरारे श्रीनाथ नारायण वासुदेव। श्रीकृष्ण गोविन्द हरे मुरारे श्रीनाथ नारायण वासुदेव। पीताम्बरं करविराजितचक्रशङ्खकौमोदकी सरसिजं करुणासमुद्रं राधासहायम् अतिसुन्दरमन्दहासं वातालयेशम् अनिशं हृदि भावयामि। वं कृष्णो रक्षतु मां चराचरगुरुः कृष्णं नमस्ये सदा। कृष्णेनैव सुरक्षितोऽहमसकृत् कृष्णाय दत्तं मनः। कृष्णादेव समुद्भवो मम विभो कृष्णस्य दासोऽस्म्यहं। कृष्णे भक्तिरचञ्चलास्तु भगवन् हे कृष्ण तुभ्यं नमः। श्रीगुरुवायूरप्पा शरणं नम्राणां सन्निधत्ते सततमपि पुरस्तैरणभ्यर्थितानपि अर्थान् कामानजस्रं वितरति परमानन्दसान्द्रां गतिं च। इत्थं निःशेषनभ्यो निरवधिकफलः पारिजातो हरे त्वं क्षुद्रं तं शक्रवाटी द्रुममभिलषति व्यर्थमर्त्यव्रजोऽयं। श्रीगुरुवायूरप्पा शरणं श्रीभट्टपादम् अनिशं हृदि भावयामि। वंशी विभूषितकरात् नवनीरधाभात् पीताम्बरात् अरुणबिम्बफलादरोष्टात् पूर्णेन्दुसुन्दरमुखात् अरविन्दनेत्रात् कृष्णात् परं किमपि तत्त्वमहं न जाने। കൈരണ്ടും കൂപ്പി ഞാൻ വീണ്ടും ഇറക്കുന്നു നീരജലോചന നിന്നോടായി. ഏതീനു മഞ്ഞനെ കുമ്പീരേണ്ടാത്തോരു രീതിയിൽ നീ എന്നെ പാലിക്കെന്നായി. കൃഷ്ണ ഹരേ ജയ കൃഷ്ണ ഹരേ ജയ കൃഷ്ണ ഹരേ ജയ കൃഷ്ണ ഹരേ. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, so let's just see. Ramya, can you do one half of 3 and then Radha Garu one? No. Okay. Sujata Swaminathan, can you do the other half?
Yeah, I can do from 3.6. Dasakam 3, Bhakta Swarupa Varnanam, Bhakti Prarthana cha. Patanto namani pramadabara sindhau nipatitaha smaranto rupam te varada katayanto gunakataha charanto ye bhaktaha tvai khalu ramante paramun aham danyan manye samadigata sarvabhilashitan गदक्लिष्टं कष्टं तव चरणसेवा रसभरेऽपि अनासक्तं चित्तं भवति बत विष्णु भवति बत विष्णो कुरुदयां भवत्पादाम्भोजस्मरण रसिको नाम निवहान् अहं गायं कुहचन विवतसयामि विजने.
And the last line, and the it is, it's a half itta, not a full ta. So vivatsyami.
विवत्स्यामि विजने कृपा ते जाता चेत् किमिव न हि लभ्यं तनुभृतां मदीयक्लेशौघप्रशमनदशा नाम कियती न के लोकेऽस्मिन् अनिशमयि शोकाभिरहिताः भवद्भक्ता मुक्ताः सुगतिम् असक्ता विदधते. मुनिप्रौढारूढाः जगति खलु गूढात्मगतयो भवत्पादाम्भोजस्मरणविरुजौ नारदमुखाः चरन्ति स्वैरं सत्ततपरिनिर्भात परचित् सदानन्दाद्वैत प्रसर मग्नाः किमपरं भवद्भक्तिस्फीता भवतु मम सैव प्रश्मयेत्
Prashamayet. Full sha.
प्रशमयेत् अशेषक्लेशौघं न खलु हृदि सन्देहकणिका न चेद्व्यासस्योक्तिः तव च वचनं नैगमवचो भवेन्मिथ्या रत्या पुरुषवचनप्रायमखिलम्.
भवद्भक्तिस् दावत् प्रमुख मधुरा द्वद्गुणरसात् किमप्यारूढा चेत् अखिल परिदाब प्रशमनी पुनः शान्ते स्वान्ते विमल परिबोधो दयमिलन् महानन्दाद्वैतं तिषति किमदः प्रार्थ्यमपरम् विधूय क्लेशान्मे गुरुचरणयुग्मं दृढशरं भवत्क्षेत्रा प्राप्धौ करमपि च दे पूजविनदौ पूजनविधौ भवन्मूर्त्या लोके नयनम् अदते भात तुलसी परिघ्राणे क्राणं स्वर्णमपि दे चारुचरिते प्रबुदाति.
Sorry, last line.
श्रवणमपि दे चारुचरिते.
Even the first line, last word, dhrita rasam, on the word.
धृतरसम् अदार्थ धृतरसम्. प्रबुदाति व्याधि प्रसभचलिते मामक हृदि द्वितीयं दत्रूपं परमसुखचित्रूपमुदीयात् उदञ्जत् रोमाञ्चो कलित बहु हर्षाश्रुनिवहो यथा विस्मर्यासं तुरुभशमपीडा परिपवान् मृत्केहादीश त्वयि खलु मरुत्केहादीश त्वयि खलु पराञ्जोऽपि सुखिनो भवदस्नेहि सोऽहं सुबहु परिदप्ये च किमितम् अकीर्दिस्ते मा भूत् वरद कदभारं प्रशमयन् भवद्भक्तो दंसं झटिति गुरु मां कंसतमन किमुग्धैर्भूयोभिः तव हि करुणा यावदुदीयाद् अहं दावेदेव प्रहित विवितार्थ प्रलपितः पुरः क्लुप्ते पादे वरद तव नेष्यामि दिवसान् यदा शक्ति व्यक्तं नतिनुति निषेवा विरचयन् श्रीकृष्णाय परब्रह्मणे नमः.
Right, good. So let's continue from the 4th. We had finished up to 10 stanzas, right? We'll start with 11. Let me just see here today. Padmagaru, you can be a student first half, and Srividya, you can be student first half. Okay. So stanza 11. Agnivasaravalakshapakshagehi uttarayana jusha cha daivataihi prapito ravipadam bhavatparo modavan dhruvapadantamiyate. So kind of a quick recap, right, where we left last time. So we spoke about how when you do the Ashtanga Yogam and then you finally reach the last state, right, you reach the state of Samadhi, and then you decide to get liberated, because like we said, at that point you get a choice. And then even in the choice of liberation, there are two types of liberation we spoke about. One was the Videha Mukti, which means you are giving everything up and instantly joining the Lord, so there's no carryover. Or you could do a Krama Mukti, where we said you can still you lose the main body, but you still take the senses and all of those things, and then you actually can go through some other worlds, which is what we're going to see. So that's where we kind of spoke, and depending on that, the Prana Vayu has to exit through either the Sahasrara Chakra at the very top or through the Agneya Chakra, right? Those are the two things we said. So now this thing is continuing on for the person, whoever decides to say, you know what, I don't want to immediately go and merge into the Lord, and I have, heard about everything else, and I want to explore this Krama Mukti path, right? So the way they talk about this Krama Mukti is, we all hear about various places in the world, and then, but some of us have not seen it. Some of us are okay not seeing it. But if you feel that, I have to go see and experience that place in person. Similarly, if you think of all of the top worlds in such a fashion, very simply put, right? And you say that, I have now got this ability, I've got the Ashtasiddhi ability right now, and I want to put that ability to use. I want to be able to travel through the worlds. I want to be like Bhaktipad said earlier, like Narada and Brigu. I want to be able to go from place to place. I should be unconstrained and just focus on the devotion of the Lord, but still want to be there. Then you take this Krama Mukti path. So first it says is what the soul does in that case is the Sukshma Shariram. It first goes to the plane of the sun. Okay, it goes and rests above the earth in the plane of the sun, and there it has to wait for Uttarayana Kalam to happen before the soul can depart the plane of the sun. So that's why, for those of you who are familiar with Mahabharata, Bhishma had this chance that he could give up his life anytime he wanted. He was so, he was such a saint, right? So he held on his life for Uttarayana Kalam, because if you die before that, and if you are liberated, that's where there's always an if condition there, right? If you are a liberated soul and you die before the Uttarayana Kalam, your soul still supposedly rests at the plane of the sun till the Uttarayana Kalam comes, from where then it starts going. Now, the eventual goal of this soul right now is to, will eventually reach Brahmalokam, but in this stanza, it says it eventually goes to Brahmalokam. But before it goes there, it actually goes through several other layers. So first there is a layer which it goes through, which is it goes over where the presiding deity of the fire, where its soul gets cleansed. And then it actually then goes into the Dhruvalokam. So the Dhruvalokam is where what we'll always refer to as the incarnation of Mahavishnu, who is there for the people in this Brahmandam to go meet. And we'll see what Brahmandam is, all that in the next set of chapters, right? Like, and we'll also go through the 14 worlds. So I don't want to get too much into it right now, but just think of it as that way. That is one of the resting place of Mahavishnu. So the soul goes there, and from there it then goes to, that is one level below Makara Lokam. So it first goes there and goes to Dhruva Lokam. That's where this stanza stops, right? So Agni Vasara Valarksha Pakshagaihi. So the ru that is there, you remove it, put a visarga comma, Pakshagaihi. The next word starts with the u. Uttarayana Jusha cha Daivataihi. Prapito Ravipadam Bhavatparo, comma, Modavan Dhruva Padantamiyate. Agnivasaravalakshapakshaghaihi Uttarayana Jusha cha Daivataihi. Prapito Ravipadam Bhavatparo, Modavan Dhruva Padantamiyate.
अग्निवासरवलरक्षपक्षगैः उत्तरायणजुषा च देवतैः प्रापितो रविपदं भवत्परो मोदवान् ध्रुवपदान्तमीयते.
Magaru, that first line or second line, Daivataihi.
Daivataihi.
And then the first line, right, is Valarksha. That it's only a ir, not a full ra. So Valarksha Pakshagaihi.
Valaraksha.
No, you are saying Valaraksha, you are saying. It's Valarksha. It's only a ir, not a ra.
Oh, Valarkshapakshagaihi.
Right.
Agnivasara Valarkshapakshagaiः उत्तरायणजुषा च देवतैः दैवतैः प्रापितो रविपदं भवत्परो मोदवान् ध्रुवपदान्तमीयते.
अग्निवाशर वलक्षपक्षकैः उत्तरायणजुषास दैवतैः प्रापितो रविपदं भवत्परो मोदवान् ध्रुवपदान्तमीयते. अग्निवासरवलक्षपक्षकैः उत्तरायणजुषास दैवतैः प्रापितो रविपदं भवत्परो मोदवान् ध्रुवपदान्तमीयते.
Sachitwa. Astito tamaharaalaye yadha sheshabhaktradahanoshmanadhyate yiyate bhavadupashrayastada vedasah padamatah puraivava. So now as this journey is continuing, right? So now the soul has reached Dhruvalokam. So once it reaches Dhruvalokam, from there it then continues and it goes to this region called as Maharalokam, right? And like I said, we'll go through this world's names and all. It comes only later, so I don't want to introduce you to those right now. So it goes to this region called Maharalokam, which is supposedly 10 million yojanas. So each yojana is about 8 miles approximately, calculation. It's 10 million yojanas above Dhruvalokam. This is Maharalokam. And the people who are in Maharalokam are the well-liberated saints and ascetics like Bhrigu and everybody, like we said, who have the ability to go between any worlds at an instant, right? That's what it talks about. They don't have to think. They only have to think, I want to be in this world, and they can be in that world. So that's the kind of power they have. So the soul now goes to that Maharalokam, and there, what it does is it sits along with all of these other souls in that Maharalokam, and you have the freedom to do whatever you want. Now, it sits there only for a particular amount of time. So it sits there only for one kalpa of Brahma, which is 4.32 billion years. Again, we are going to see all of that later, right? So it sits there when the Naimittika Pralayam happens, which is the end of the day of Brahma. when the end of the day of Brahma happens, all of these bottom worlds completely get destroyed. So before that fire comes, which is going to burn up all of these bottom worlds, all of these souls are then transported up to the Satyalokam, which is where Brahma is there, and they all go sit in the Satyalokam for a period of time. And we'll see how long it sits there. But so that's the flow right now. So that's why it says here, Shesha Vakta Dahanosh Manardate. It says when the fire from Adishesha comes and then it burns off all of these worlds when Naimittika Pralaya happens, before that fire comes, before the destruction happens, because these souls are liberated, the souls don't have to get destroyed. So these souls then move up, and then they move up and go sit in the Satyalokam or the Brahma Lokam at the end of the Naimittika Pralayam. So Astitota Maharalaye Yada, Shesha Vaktra Dahanoshmanardhyate Iyate Bhavadupashrayas Tada, Vedasaha, put a F, Padamataha, put a F again, Padamatah Puraivava. And there again, Bhavad Upashrayas, again, you have to take refuge in the Lord. It's not like all the people who are already there are liberated souls. So anyway, believe in the Lord and who are always praying to the Lord. So you take refuge to the Lord and you go up to the next level. Astito Tamaharalaye Yada Shesha Bhaktra Dahanoshmanardhyate Iyate Bhavadupashrayas Tada Vedasah Padamatah Puraivava.
आस्तितोऽथ महरालये यदा शेषवक्त्रदहनोष्मनाथ्यते ईयते भवदुपाश्रयस्तदा वेदसः पदमतः पुरैव वा आस्तितोऽथ महरालये यदा शेषवक्त्रदहनोष्मनाथ्यते ईयते भवदुपाश्रयस्तदा वेदसः पदमतः पुरैव वा
आस्तितोदमहरालये यदा शेषवक्त्रदहनोष्मनार्त्यते ईयते भवदुपाश्रयस्तदा वेदसः पदमदः पुरैव वा आस्तितोदमहरालये यदा शेषवक्त्रदहनोष्मनार्त्यते ईयते भवदुपाश्रयस्तदा Vedasah padamadah puraiva va.
Answer 13. Tatra va tava pade tava vasanne prakrita pralayayeti muktatam swechhaya khalu pura vimuchyate samvibidya jagadanda mojasa. So now you now reach this Brahma Loka or Satya Loka, and there this was at the end of the one day of Brahma, which you said, which is like 4.32 billion years. But Brahma actually has 100 years. And each day approximately 360 times 100, right? That's the life of Brahma. Again, all of that is going to come later. But till the Prakrita Pralayam comes, which is the destruction of the entire 14 worlds, including the elimination of Brahma, the soul then sits there in the Brahma Loka, right? What the soul does, even I don't know, but it sits there in the Brahma Loka. And then when everything is done at the end of the Prakrita Pralayam, all of this goes and merges into the Supreme Brahman, which is in the Vaikuntha set of planets, which are about 20 million yojanas above the Brahma Loka or Satya Loka. That's where it actually goes and merges. So then everything at the time, there's no Brahmanda, nothing is there. It all goes and merges at that point. Now, even before that, it has a choice. If as a soul you decide, I don't want to wait till the end of the life of Brahma, and I quickly want to now, from this point, I still want to go immediately merge with the Lord. You still, with the yogic power you have, it says you can pierce through the shell of the Brahmandam. It's not a physical shell, it's a virtual shell. So they can pierce through the shell of the Brahmandam, and we'll see what the Brahmandam is right in chapter 5. So it pierces through that thing, and then you can still go and merge, it says. So it says you still have a choice. You don't have to wait till the end of Brahma's life to go merge. You can go and merge even earlier with the yogic power that you have. So tatrava tava padetava vasanne, prakrita pralaya yeti muktatam swechhaya khalu pura vimuchyate. Some books have purapi. If you have that api, then you can just remove it. Khalu pura vimuchyate, samvibhidya jagadandam ojasa. तत्र वा तव पदेऽथवा वसन् प्राकृतप्रलयहेति मुक्ततां स्वेच्छया खलु पुरा विमुच्यते संविभिद्य जगदण्डमोजसा.
तत्र वा तव पदे तवा वसन् प्राकृतः प्रलय एति मुक्ततां स्वच्छया खलु पुरा विमुच्यते संविभिद्य जगदण्डमोजसा.
No, you lost the tune there, but the third line is swechaya.
स्वेच्छया
Yeah, swa-ichaya. Yeah, that's swechaya.
तत्र वा तव पथे तवा वसन् प्राकृतः प्रलययेति मुक्ततां स्वेच्छया खलु पुरा विमुच्यते संविभिद्य जगदण्डमोजसा.
तत्र वा तव पदे तवा वसन् प्राकृतप्रलययेति मुक्तताम् स्वेच्छया खलु पुरा विमुच्यते संविभिद्य जगदण्डमोजसा. तत्र वा तव पदे तवा वसन् प्राकृतप्रलययेति मुक्तताम् स्वेच्छया खलु पुरा विमुच्यते संविभिद्य जगदण्डमोजसा.
Cancer 14. तस्य च क्षितिपयो महो निलध्यो महत् प्रकृति सप्तकावृतीः तत्तदात्मकतया विशन् सुखी याति ते पदमनावृतं विभो. So now this Brahmandam that we spoke about, which we'll see in 5, there are some layers outside of that Brahmandam. So like I said, you are still carrying the Sukshma Shariram still, right? And when you're merging into the Lord, you cannot have that. So that has a couple of layers. So one of the layers, first is it's got the Panchabhutas. Even that still carries the Panchabhutas at that time. And then it has this ability to identify, the intelligence is also there, because that's when you can experience and sense, right? Because if you don't have the senses, you cannot go to different worlds, you cannot experience things. So it still has the senses, it still has the intelligence that is there, Mahat that is there. So all of these layers are still there. So we're going to keep it in a very dumbed down version, right? Because only then it's easy for it to even get an idea of it. So think of it as you have multiple layers, and as you're going out of the Brahmanda, there are different layers you go through, and in each of these layers come out of the soul, and then finally only the pure soul is left, which is nothing but the Paramatma, and that is how it can go and merge into the Lord in Vaikuntha, right? So that is how these layers are there outside the Brahmanda. Now in chapter 5, when we talk about the evolution of the cosmos, you're going to see the reverse of this happening. We're going to see how from the Lord all of these layers are getting formed, and then the Brahmandam is getting formed, right? That's how chapter 5 is going to come. So this becomes the entire reverse of it. So if it's forming in that way, when it is going back, each of this has to get shed. Think of it in very simple terms. You shed layers of clothes, Mari. You shed layers of this, and then finally the pure soul then goes and reaches into the Vaikuntham. It reaches merges into the Lord, the Supreme Brahman at that time. So tasya cha kshiti payo maho anila, but you can say it together, maho nila, and then put a plus. Dyo mahat prakriti saptakavritihi. That line is together. Tattadatma kataya vishan sukhi, comma, yati te padamanavritam vibho. तस्य च क्षितिपयो महो निलध्यो महत् प्रकृति सप्तकावृतीः तत्तदात्मकतया विशन् सुखी याति ते पदमनावृतं विभो.
तस्य च क्षतिपयो महो निलज्यो महत्प्रकृति सप्तकावृतीः तत्तदात्मकतया विशन् सुखी याति ते पदमनावृतं विभो. तस्य चक्षितिपयो महो निलध्यो तस्य चक्षितिपयो महो निलध्यो महत्प्रकृति सप्तकावृतीः तत्तदात्मकतया विशन् सुखी याति ते पदमनावृतं विभो
तस्य च शितिभयो महो निलद्यो महत्प्रकृतिशब्दकावृत्तिः तत्तदात्मगतया विसंशुकी यादिदे पदमनावृतं विभो तस्य च शितिभयो महो निलद्यो महत्प्रकृतिशब्दकावृत्तिः तत्तदात्मगतया विसंशुकी यादिदे पदमनावृतं विभो.
Actually, the second line after Sukhi, there is a comma, okay?
Okay.
The second.
तत्तदात्मगतया विसंशुकी यादिदे पदमनावृतं विभो.
Stanza 15. अर्चिरादिगतिमीदृशीं व्रजन् विच्युतिं न भजते जगत्पते सच्चिदात्मकभवद्गुणोदयान् उच्चरन्तमनिलेश पाहि माम्. So like we said, the final Brahman doesn't have any state, doesn't have any form. And that's why when you're going through all of these things, even though you are liberated, the soul still has to shed any sense of identity and any sense of intelligence. All of that is completely shed, and only the pure soul then goes and merges, right? So anyway, here it is wrapping up saying, with this, O Lord, by following this Ashtanga Yogam, I will go in this Archiradi. I'm going to go in the path of the light to eventually go and merge into the Lord, right? So please, for me, who is Lord of Guruvayur, for one who I'm constantly singing your praises, please bless me and then please protect me and eradicate all the ailments. So, Archiradi gatim idrishim brajanne, comma, vichyutim na bhajate jagatpate, which is, and the person once is liberated is not born again, so he doesn't come back. Once you, that's the main thing about this main Vaikuntham, and we'll see the two types of Vaikuntham also. But the main Vaikuntham, when it's there, you cannot come back. There's no two path that is there, right? So once you merge, that's it, right? Then you will only come when the next creation happens and the next Brahma comes, and then all of the souls are born again, then you get born again. Otherwise, you don't get to come back. Sachidatmaka bhavat gunodayan. So that nu that is there, you put a in, gunodayan, comma. Next word starts with the u. Ucharantam anilesha pahimam. Archira digatimi drishim vrajanhe vichyutim na bhajate jagatpate sachidatmaka bhavat gunodayan ucharantam anilesha pahimam.
आचिरादिगति मे दृशीं అచ్చిరాదిగతి మీ దృశీం వరజన్ అంతేనండి.
Vichyutim na bhajate.
ఉచ్యుతిం right?
Vichyutim.
అచ్చిరాదిగతి మే దృశీం వ్రజన్ ఉచ్యుతిం న భజతే జగత్పతే సచ్చిదాత్మక భవద్గుణోదయానుచ్చరంతమనిలేశ పాహి మాం. అచ్చిరాదిగతి మీ దృశీం వ్రజన్ ఉచ్యుతిం న భజతే జగత్పతే సచ్చిదాత్మక భవద్గుణోదయానుచ్చరంతమనిలేశ పాహి మాం.
हर्षिराधिकदिमितृसिं वृजन् विश्युदिं न भजते जगत्पते सच्चिदात्मकभवद्गुणोदयान् उच्चरन्दमनिलेश पाहि माम्. हर्षिराधिकदिमितृसिं वृजन् विश्युदिं न भजते जगत्पते सच्चिदात्मकभवद्गुणोदयान् उच्चरन्दमनिलेश पाहि माम्.
Krishnaya Parabrahmane Namaha completes 4. So the next set of Dashakams, right? 5, 6, 7, 8. So this, see, before you get into things which we are familiar with, which is, I know how Varaha Avataram is, I know how Kurma Avataram is, Narasimha Avataram, all of us know that. But before that, we have to understand the greatness of the Lord who created this entire cosmos, right? Because all of those things come much later, right? So we have to first, we are now going to trace back to the very, very beginnings, right? So the next set of chapters, little difficult to understand, also very difficult for me to explain, because I also have not experienced it. If it is a story like Narsimha Avataram, it is easy to say, right? But when you're talking very abstract concepts, it's very, very hard. So we'll try to do as much as we can. So the next set of chapters are going to focus on two main things. One of them is it's going to first talk about how the whole cosmos evolved, number one. And then it is going to talk all the way from once the cosmos, which is kind of the, you think of it as a physical layer, things are there. How did everything else start coming? Starting from the first Brahma to the Brahma who exists right now, how that evolution happens. And from that Brahma, how everything starts coming out. So we're going to see all of that. That is going to be 5, 6, 7, 8. So it's actually, there is the first avataram of the Lord actually happens in chapter 5. It's not Matsya Avataram or Kurma Avataram, right? We'll see the first Avataram of the Lord, which happens in chapter 5 here during the cosmic evolution. So this is the chapter title here is Sanskrit Virat Purushotpatti, Virat Purusha Utpatti Prakara Varnana. So description of the beginning or the coming of the Virat form of the Lord. Because in chapter 6, Dasakam 6, we're going to see what is that Virat form of the Lord. That's going to come in stanzas. Dasakam 6. 5 is how the Virat form of the Lord is coming into being, which is the evolution of the cosmos itself. Okay, so this is a 4 stanza thing. So it's going to be the tune of the four liners. Stanza 1. Vyakta vyaktamidam na kinchida bhavate prakrita prakshaye Mayayam gunasamya ruddha vikrutau Tvayagatayam layam No mrityuscha tadamritam cha samabhut Nano naratre stitihi Tatraikastvamashishyatah kila Parananda prakashatmaha. So some of the words will start becoming familiar, and you hear it 3-4 times and you'll know what it is. So it speaks about the Prakrita Pralayam, and I told you that Prakrita Pralayam is where the soul then has to sit in Brahma Loka. It has to wait for the end of the life of Brahma, which is 100 years, right? And then we said it finally goes, right? So it says when the Prakrita Pralayam is done, he says at that time there is nothing. So whatever is Vyaktam is something which is clear and manifested in a certain form, like us, all the worlds, everything. Then there are Avyaktam, things which are there, which we cannot comprehend, which we cannot see, right? So all of the Avyaktam, he says there's nothing there. There's no Vyaktam which is there. There's no Avyaktam that is there. Everything that is there is merged into you, O Lord. There is no birth, there is no death, there is no liberation, there is no day, there is no night. There is a state of nothingness, right? And in that state of nothingness, all that remains is you who remains in your supreme bliss in that form which is there. And there's absolutely a state of nothingness, right? Because that's how you have to start. You have to start with nothing. But anyway, it will continue to say there's no nothing. But anyway, this says there's nothing else happening except you who is in a supreme bliss state. So Vyakta Vyaktamidam na kinchida bhavat. After that, bhavat, put a comma. Prakrita prakshaye, comma. Mayayam guna samya ruddha vikrutau, comma. Tvayagatayam layam. Vyakta vyaktamidam na kinchida bhavate prakrita prakshaye Mayayam guna samya ruddha vikrutau Tvayagatayam layam.
Vyakta vyaktamidam na kinchidabhavat praka prakruta pakshaye Mayayam gunasamya ruddha vikrutau Tvayagatayam layam. Vyakta vyaktamidam na kinchidabhavat praka prakruta pakshaye Mayayam gunasamya ruddha vikrutau Tvayagatayam layam.
Padmagaru, that first line, it's prak, ik sound. So prakrita.
Prakruta. Okay.
Yeah.
Vyakta vyaktamidam na kinjita bhavat prakrita prakshaye Mayayam gunashamya ruddha vikrutau Tvayagatayam layam. Vyakta vyaktamidam na kinjita bhavat prakrita prakshaye मायायां गुणशाम्यरुद्धविकृतौ त्वय्यागतायां लयम्
No mrityuscha tadhamritam cha samabhoot. You'll have an in there, samabhunano, but when it break it, it becomes a it. So samabhoot, comma, nahno na ratrehe, put is ratres stitihi, put a visarga, comma, nahno na ratres stitihi. Next line, that is goes away. Tatraikas tvamashishyatāha, put a ich sound to join. So shishyatah kila, comma, parananda prakashatmana. No mrityuscha tadamritam cha samabhoot, nahno naratre stitihi, tatraikastvamashishyatāh kila, parananda prakashatmana.
नो मृत्युच्च ददामृतं च समभूत नाह्नो न रात्रे स्थितिः तत्रैकस्त्वमशिष्यदा हि किल परानन्दप्रकाशात्मना.
The second line, that shishyataha, you don't have to say the visarga, you put the ich sound to join, right? So shishyatah kila.
Okay. नो मृत्युश्च तदामृतं च समभूत नाह्नो न रात्रिस्थितिः तत्रैकस्त्वमशिष्यताः किल परानन्दप्रकाशात्मना. नो मृत्युश्च, second time, yeah, right?
Yeah, no mrityuscha.
No
You
mrityuscha.
did it, yeah. You did it, Padma.
I did.
Yeah.
Thank you.
नो मृत्युश्च तथामृतं च समभूत् नाह्नो न रात्रे स्थितिः शिष्यताः किल परानन्दप्रकाशात्मना. नो मृत्युश्च तथामृतं च समभूत् नाह्नो न रात्रे स्थितिः तत्रैकस्त्वमशिष्यताः किल परानन्दप्रकाशात्मना.
Answer 2. Kalah karma gunascha jeevanivahaः vishwam cha karyam vibho chillīlāratimi yushe tvaitada nirlīnata māyayuhu tesham naiva vadantya sattvamayī bhoः shaktyātmana tishthatāṃ no chet kim gagana prasūna sadrishāṃ bhūyo bhavet sambhavah. Like we said, Lord, when everything is merged, there's no concept of time at that point, and all the karmas, everything is merged. All the gunas, the sattva, rajas, tamas gunas are all merged. All the jivas are in you, right? And there's absolutely state of nothingness, and you are just in your state of supreme bliss, right? So at that time, it says, however, you cannot say that nothing exists. Because he says, even the Vedas, he says, never says that nothing exists. Because if nothing exists, how can it come? How can it be born again, right? How can it come again? So he says, you cannot say it as nothing exists. You'll have to say it exists, but in a form which is not normal. So the couple of examples, simple examples to understand, right? May not be technically exactly correct, but approximate, right? If you think of a seed, right? An apple seed. And if I ask somebody, is there an apple tree in this? The question is no, you don't see an apple tree. But you see the seed, right? But doesn't mean the apple tree doesn't exist, because I plant that seed, I water it, sunlight falls, over a course of time, a tree comes out of it. So which means the tree was not there, but everything that is required for the tree to be there was existing in some form in that seed, right? So that is how they say you have to interpret this. It says all of that is there. It is just sitting in some causal form in the Lord. And when the time comes, then it takes the form. It goes through some transformations, and all of these other things come about, right? So that is the way to interpret it. You cannot say nothing absolutely doesn't exist, right? And another one beautiful explanation somebody gave in the one thing is, like you all know the peahen, right? Not the peacock, the peahen. The peahen is the male, which has the feathers. And when the rainy season comes, it says how the peahen goes and opens up and shows the feathers to the peacock to attract it. And then when the time is attracted, it brings off the feathers back and pulls it into it. He says that is how you should think of the Lord creating the cosmos. When he thinks it is time, he goes and opens it up and shows the cosmos. And when the time is done, he just pulls it all back into himself. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It all exists. It still resides within the Lord, even when the Prakrita Pralayam is done at that point. So Kalaha, put a Kala, Karma, Gunascha, Jiva, Nivahaha. So put a Visarga and comma there. You may not have it. Visarga, comma. Vishwam cha Karyam Vibho, comma. Chilli Laratim Eyushi. It's one word. Chilli Laratim Eyushi Tvai Tada, comma. Nirlinatam Ayayuhu. Kalah karma gunascha jiva nivahaha vishwam cha karyam vibho chilli larati me yushit tvaitada nirlinatamaya
Kalah karma gunascha jivanivahaha vishwancha karyam vibho chillilarati me yushitvayi tada nirlinatamaya Kalah karma gunascha jivanivahaha vishwancha karyam vibho chillilarati me yushitvayi tada nirlinatamaya
कालः कर्म गुणाश्च जीवन्निवहाः विश्वं च कार्यं विभो चिल्लीलारतिमेयुषी त्वयि तथा निर्लीनतामाययुः कालः कर्म गुणाश्च जीवनिवहाः विश्वं च कार्यं विभो चिल्लीलारतिमेयुषी त्वयि तथा निर्लीनतामाययुः
Tesham naiva vadantya sattvamai bhoho, comma, shaktyatmana tishthatam, comma, no chet kim gagana prasuna sadrisham, comma, bhuyo bhavet sambhavaha. Tesham naiva vadantya sattvamai bhoho Shaktyaatmana tishthatam no chet kim gagana prasuna sadrisham bhuyo bhavet sambhavaha.
Tesham naiva vadantya satvamayi bhoho shaktyaatmana tishtatam no chet kim gagana prasuna sadrusham bhuyo bhavet sambhavaha. Tesham naiva vadantya satvamayi bhoho shaktyaatmana tishtatam no chet kim gagana prasuna sadrusham bhuyo bhavet sambhavaha.
तेषां नैव वधन्य स्वत्वमयि भोः शक्त्यात्मना निष्ठतां नो चेत् किं गगनप्रसूनशत्रुषां भूयो भवेत् सम्भवः तेषां नैव वधन्य सत्त्वमयि भूः शक्त्यात्मना तिष्ठतां नो चेत् किं गगनप्रसूनशत्रुषां भूयो भवेत् सम्भवः.
Okay, we'll just switch. Sujata Garu, you can be a student, and Usha Garu, you can be a student. Stanza 3. Evam cha Evam cha dviparardha kala vigata vikshamsi srikshatmikam bibhrane tvai chukshubhe tribhuvani bhavaya maya swayam mayatah khalu kala shaktirakila drishtam swabhavopi cha pradurbhuya gunan vikasya vidatuhu tasya sahaya kriyam. So when the dviparardha kala gets over, which means the two parardhas of Brahma gets over. And again, some of it's going to come later. So we'll define what a parardha is in the next, in 7th chapter or something. So when the life of the Brahma gets over, right? So when the 100 years of Brahma gets over, because right now we are in Dvitiya Pararthi, the second parardha of Brahma. So when that gets over, it says that you, O Lord, you are you don't actually have like an intention to create. See, the Lord is not bound by karma. The moment you want to do something, you are bound by it. You now have a karma attached to it. That's why when we go to work, when we want to do something, everything we do is a karma. But like you said, one of the things the Lord cannot have is he cannot be bound by karma. So he says, you do not have an intention to create. You are only a witness to the act of creation, right? And what that means is you do not get engaged in it directly. So the way it explains it is, you just do this thing called as ikshana. You just have like it's like an activity which happens like when you bring a magnet and then you keep a lot of this iron, metal pieces around it. The magnet automatically attracts. A magnet doesn't want to say I want to attract and it tries to attract. It naturally happens. So similarly, he talks about how you have this will that you resort to this activity where that triggers the act of creation. Now, I don't know how that actually happens, right? It's so complicated. So, but it says you do not have the will. You just, when you decide the time is right, at that time, the process automatically starts, because that's what the act of ikshana is called, which means you just look and then it starts, the process starts, right? So first, what happens, it says, is when this process starts, it says everything, all of these things are, nothing is there, like we said earlier. Then things start happening. And the first thing which happens is kind of all this definition of what this guna is, and all of that is beginning to come. The concept of time comes, because previously there was no concept of time, like we said. She says the concept of time comes. Then all the imprints of the karmas which are there of all the jivas, they all start getting formed. And this process is going to go on for a few stanzas. But first, anyway, all these gunas, everything is in equilibrium. And when the viparartha happens, you decide the time is right. And then with the help of Maya, the whole process is now going to start from the next stanza. So, evam cha dviparardha kala vigata viksham si srikshatmikam. So that line is continuous, comma, bibrane tvai, comma, chukshubhe tribhuvani bhavaya maya swayam. Evam cha dviparardha kala vigata viksham si srikshatmikam bibrane tvai chukshubhe tribhuvani bhavaya maya swayam. You're on mute. You're on mute. Oh, what is it, Sujata Garu? I can't hear you.
Sujata Garu, right? Not me,
Yeah.
right, Rajesh?
Sujata Appalanini, yeah. You're not able to. Yeah, I think still cannot hear you. Okay. Lata, inga pandrela till she comes.
Can I go, Rajesh
Yeah,
Garu?
why don't you go, Usha Garu? Let's see when she comes here.
Evancha dviparabdhakala vigata viksham susrikshitatmikam bibrane tvai chakshubhe tribhuvani bhavaya maya swayam.
The second line after tvai, there is a comma, okay?
Tvai, okay, sorry, okay. Evancha dvipararthakala vigata viksham susrikshitatmikam bibrane tvai chakshubhe tribhuvani bhavaya maya swayam.
Sujata Garu, are you back?
एवं च द्विपरार्धकालविगता वीक्षांसि सृक्षात्मिकां बिभ्राणे त्वयि चुक्षुभे त्रिभुवनी भावाय माया स्वयम् एवं च द्विपरार्धकालविगता वीक्षांसि सृक्षात्मिकां बिभ्राणे त्वयि चुक्षुभे त्रिभुवनी भावाय माया स्वयम्
Mayatah khalu, comma, Kala Shakti Rakhila Drishtam. That one word, Kala Shakti Rakhila Drishtam Swabhavopi Cha, comma, Pradurbhuya Gunan Vikasya Bidaduhu. So that is there. You put a visarga, comma, Bidaduhu Tasya Sahaya Kriyam. Mayatah khalu Kalashaktirakila drishtam swabhavopi cha pradurbhuya gunan vikasya vidaduhu tasya sahaya kriyam.
मायातः खलु कालशक्तिरखिला दृष्टं स्वभावोऽपि च प्रादुर्भूय गुणान् विकास्य विदुदुः तस्याः सहायक्रियाम्.
Ushagaru, the third line after Kalu, there is a pause, okay? Third line.
Kalu, yeah, yes, sir. Yeah. मायतः खलु कालशक्तिरखिला दृष्टं स्वभावोऽपि च प्रादुर्भूय गुणान् विकास्य विदुदुः तस्याः सहायक्रियाम्.
मायातः खलु कालशक्तिरखिला दृष्टं स्वभावोऽपि च प्रादुर्भूय गुणान् विकास्य विदधुः तस्या सहायक्रिया. मायातः खलु कालशक्तिरखिला दृष्टं स्वभावोऽपि च प्रादुर्भूय गुणान् विकास्य विदधुः तस्या सहायक्रियाम्.
And so forth. Maya sannihito pravishta vapusha sakshiti gito bhavan bhedaistam pratibhimbato vivishivan jivopi naiva paraha kaladi pratiboditata bhavata sanchodita cha swayam maya sa khalu buddhitatvamasrajat yosau mahanuchyate. So, like we said, with Maya sannihito, along with the help of Maya, however, not being influenced by Maya, because then Lord cannot be influenced, be controlled by Maya. The act on will define what that is to some extent, right? So with that, this process is starting. So the way they say is, and this is also going to come in the 99th chapter, the whole creation, the whole 14 worlds and all of the material energy which is there in the Brahmandam, it says is only 1/4 of the total energy of the Supreme Brahman. And we'll see how this massive this is going to be, right? Because this process is just starting, but this whole thing is only 1/4 of the actual energy. So it says is, oh Lord, all of the things which come out and all of the beings which exist, fundamentally, they all want to be part of you. But then you take a portion of your energy, like 1/4 of your energy, and that goes into this act of material creation which is happening. And all the souls and everything which are coming out, right? They all tend to forget the fact that they all love you and they all want to be part of you, because they now have a newfound freedom, right? So if you kind of let somebody go, a small child out to play, the child eventually has to come to the parents or the mother, but initially it feels like it has a freedom and it wants to play. It says, think of it very simply in that sense, that the souls, everything which is going to come out, are now going to feel like they have the freedom. They feel like they have to go experience this whole process, and that is the act. This is an illusion. That is Maya. So with that illusion, right, all this process is starting. And if you remember, the Kapilopadesham, 15th chapter, which is Prakriti, Mahada, Hankarascha, Tanmascha, Matrascha, Bhutani. That is a sequence, because that's what Kapila is telling Devahuti. He's telling Devahuti how the process of creation happens. This process has been explained by multiple people. One is Kapila telling to Devahuti, then Brahma tells to Narada, but Brahma hears it from the Lord later on in the 7th chapter. So anyway, in the process, it says first there is this one universal soul. There is no concept of you or me or any of those things. It's all just one, right? And that sense of oneness is still there at the beginning. Okay, but there are still individual jivas which get created, like we said earlier, to let them to go play out, right? So these individual jivas are there, and the first layer, the first sense of things that starts coming is Mahat. So we talked about this concept of Purusha, who is the supreme being, who is the supreme conscious soul. Then we spoke about this something called as a Prakriti, which we said was, it is a source from which things can happen. It cannot be the end. It's the beginning of everything. And we said when the equilibrium or things get distracted, then the various combinations start happening. So it's still but first step right now, what is happening is this Purusha is there. All the individual souls, jivas are all there, but they're all one. There's no separation. The first thing that comes is the concept of intelligence, which is the Mahat. That is the first one that begins to come, so that the soul can realize that I am part of the supreme being, right? You have to first realize that realization comes at the very beginning, the realization comes at the very end, right? And rest of the time we all forget that we all are part of that one being, right? So this is the first thing that comes here, is the concept of Mahat is coming, because that is making the soul feel that I am part of the supreme being. So Maya Sannihito Pravishta. You say it together because it's Apravishta with the S symbol. So Sannihito Pravishta Vapusha, comma, Sakshiti Gito Bhavan, comma, Vedaistam Pratibhimbato Vivishivan, comma, Jivopi Naivaparaha. Maya Sannihito Pravishta Vapusha Sakshiti Gito Bhavan Bhedaistam Pratibimbato Vivishivan Jivopi Naiva Paraha.
माया सन्निहितो प्रविष्टवपुषा साक्षीत्कितो भवान् भेतैस्तां प्रतिबिम्बतो विविशवान् जीवोऽपि नैवापरः माया सन्निहितो प्रविष्टवपुषा साक्षीत्कितो भवान् भेतैस्तां प्रतिबिम्बतो विविशवान् जीवोऽपि नैवापरः
माया सन्निहितो प्रविष्टवपुषा साक्षीति गीतो भवान् भेदैस्तां प्रतिबिम्बतो विविशिवान् जीवोऽपि नैवापरः माया सन्निहितो प्रविष्टवपुषा साक्षीति गीतो भवान् भेदैस्तां प्रतिबिम्बतो विविशिवान् जीवोऽपि नैवापरः
Kaladi Pratibodhitata Bhavata, comma, Sanchodita Cha Swayam, comma, Maya Sakhalu, comma, Buddhi Tattvam Asrjat Yosau. You can break it in those four parts if you want, it will be easier. Buddhi Tattvam Asrjat Yosau Mahanuchyate. कालादि प्रतिबोधिता भवता संचोदिता च स्वयं माया सा खलु बुद्धितत्त्वमसृजत् योऽसौ महानुच्यते
कालादिप्रतिबोधिताथ भवता संचोदिता च स्वयं माया सा खलु बुद्धितत्त्वमसृज्यदोऽसौ महानुच्यते कालादिप्रतिबोधिताथ भवता संचोदिता च स्वयं माया सा खलु बुद्धितत्त्वमसृज्यदोऽसौ महानुच्यते
कालादिप्रतिबोधिताथ भवता संचोदितात च स्वयं माया सा खलु बुद्धितत्त्वमसृजद्योऽसौ महानुच्यते कालादिप्रतिबोधिताथ भवता संचोदिता च स्वयं माया सा खलु बुद्धितत्त्वमसृजद्योऽसौ महानुच्यते
तत्रासौ त्रिगुणात्मकोऽपि च महान् सत्त्वप्रधान स्वयं जीवेऽस्मिन् खलु निर्विकल्पमहमिद्युद्बोधनिष्पादकः चक्रेऽस्मिन् सविकल्पबोधकमहं तत्त्वं महान् खल्वसौ सम्पुष्टं त्रिगुणैस्तमोति बहुलं विष्णु भवत्प्रेरणात्. So like we said, when it starts off, right? So all of these, the Mahat, the intelligence which is there, there's only Sattva Guna. There's only one Guna at that point, which is the pure Sattva Guna. So it assumes that everybody who is there is part of the same consciousness. There is no individuality, and the entire cosmos is created as one. Now, what happens then is this concept of this Tamoguna, this upsurge in that because of Bhavat Prerana, because of you willing, there is a Tamoguna, that concept of individuality starts coming. So when this individuality starts coming, then all of these souls begin to think of each of them as a unique individual. Now, if you just go back to the 4th chapter, which we did today, we spoke about that. I think it was stanza 14. Like I said, when you pierce through the Brahmandam and you start shedding these layers, right? And the last layer to shed was the Mahat. And the layer which is there before shedding the Mahat is this concept of this individuality that is there. So that concept of individuality is the next thing we starts getting formed. Now, there are going to be a couple of these things. Now, when we are explaining this doesn't mean that people and souls are beginning to be born right now, because those two things are separate. This is talking about the general process, but the sequence of who comes first, who comes second, all of that is going to come only later. Okay, so don't mix those two things. So this is the general concept of how the cosmos, how everything comes into existence. So this talks about how that individuality concept is coming, and that is how it's not there when there's only sattva gunam, because the supreme Brahman doesn't have various gunas, only pure sattva. And then when the tamo guna starts coming, the individuality starts coming. So tatrasau trigunatmakopi cha mahan, comma, sattva pradhanaha, put is sattva pradhana swayam, comma, jivesmin khalu, comma, nirvikalpam aham ityudbodha. I'll break it into 4 parts. Nirvikalpam aham ityudbodha, if you want to break it, or you say it together. Ahamit yudbodha nishpadakaha. Tatrasau trigunatmakopi cha mahan sattva pradhana swayam jivesmin khalu nirvikalpam ahamit yudbodha nishpadakaha.
तत्रासौ त्रिगुणात्मकोऽपि च महान् सत्त्वप्रधानस्वयं जीवेऽस्मिन् खलु महामित्योद्भता निष्पादकः.
Nirvikalpam ahamityudbodha.
Okay.
The me you have, right? The me. So ahamityudbodha.
Okay then. Yeah. तत्रासौ त्रिगुणात्मकोऽपि च महान् तत्त्वप्रधानस्वयं जीवेऽस्मिन् खलु निर्विकल्पम् अहमित्योद्भत निष्पादकः. Right, sir?
Yeah, they got, yeah.
Thank you.
तत्रासौ त्रिगुणात्मकोऽपि महान् सत्त्वप्रधानस्वयं जीवेऽस्मिन् खलु निर्विकल्पमहमित्युद्बोधनिष्पादकः. तत्रासौ त्रिगुणात्मकोऽपि च महान् सत्त्वप्रधानस्वयं जीवेऽस्मिन् खलु निर्विकल्पमहमित्युद्बोधनिष्पादकः.
Chakresmin savikalpa bodhaka mahan tatvam mahan khalvasau, comma, sampushtam trigunais tamoti bahulam, comma, Vishnu bhavat preranat. Chakresmin savikalpa bodhaka mahan tatvam mahan khalvasau sampushtam trigunais tamoti bahulam Vishnu bhavat preranat.
चक्रेऽस्मिन् सविकल्पबोधक महान् तत्त्वं महान् कल्वसौ सम्पुष्टं त्रिगुणैस्तमोति बहुलं विष्णो भवत्प्रेरणात्.
The third line, Mahan Tattvam.
Mahan Tattvam. Okay, Mahan. Okay. Chakresmin savikalpabodak mahan Chakresmin savikalpabodhaka mahan tattvam mahan kalvasau sampushtam trigunais-tamoti bahulam Vishnu bhavat preranat.
So I think the third line, again, the correction, right? So the right way is savikalpa, that particular word, right? Savikalpaka bodhakam ahan tattvam. So there's a concept of ahankara. So remember that word, right? The individuality, the sense of ego. So that ahan tattvam. So it's bodhakam ahan tattvam. But you don't have to break it exactly like that. You can say it together. Savikalpaka bodhakam ahan tattvam.
Okay. Can I try one more time? चक्रेऽस्मिन् सविकल्पबोधकमहं तत्त्वं महान् कल्वसौ. Thanks.
Yeah, that's correct.
सम्पुष्टं त्रिगुणैस्तमोति बहुलं विष्णो भवत्प्रेरणात्.
चक्रेऽस्मिन् सविकल्पबोधकमहं तत्त्वं महान् खल्वसौ सम्पुष्टं त्रिगुणैस्तमोति बहुलं विष्णो भवत्प्रेरणात् चक्रेऽस्मिन् सविकल्पबोधकमहं तत्त्वं महान् खल्वसौ सम्पुष्टं त्रिगुणैस्तमोति बहुलं विष्णो भवत्प्रेरणात्.
Answer 6. सोऽहं च त्रिगुणक्रमात् त्रिविधताम् आसाद्य वैकारिको भूयस्तैजसतामसाविति भवन् आद्येन सत्त्वात्मना देवानिन्द्रियमाणिनो कृत दिशा वातार्कभाष्यश्विनो वह्नीन्द्राच्युतमित्रकान् विदुविदे श्रीरुद्रशारीरकान्. So right now, so far, we have the one supreme soul which was there, and then we had the concept of intelligence which comes, so you can infer what's happening. Then you have the concept of individuality, ahankaram, which is there, so all the souls can differentiate from each other, right? So the next thing which starts coming is this concept of the all the what do you call that, organs, not the organs itself, but the concept of that, right? So indriyams, when you have the concept of taste, concept of smell, concept of all of that, because if you think of, again, think of what we learned in the 4th Dasakam. When your soul has to go back, even if it is liberated, like we said, it is sitting in the Maharloka, we said it can go from place to place and it can enjoy whatever it wants. So if it has to do that, it has to have the concept of hearing, it has to have the concept of sight, it has to have the concept of touch, it has to have all of those actions, all of that has to be there. Otherwise, how can anybody move from place to place and all of that, right? So when it starts shedding, that is the first thing, that's the thing it sheds. It sheds those 10 concepts of the feelings of these things. Then it sheds the individuality, then it sheds the intelligence, then it goes and merges. So when the creation is happening, it goes in the reverse order, right? So you have intelligence happening, you have ego happening, and then the individuality happening. And now what happens is these 10 things, which is the 5 organs of perception, things associated with it, which is your, the ability to see, ability to hear, taste, touch, smell, all of those concepts are beginning to come. And then there are the actions, organs of action, right? Which means to be able to, speak, to be able to speak, to be able to touch, the hands has to be there. So all of those concepts are coming. And along with all of those concepts are the associated lords, gods who are actually getting formed also. So all of that has to happen before an actual soul can happen, because when your individual is born, because when an individual is born, they're already born with all of these concepts already. They have a concept of eye, they have a concept of sense or a seeing. All of these combinations can vary depending on whether you are a fish or you're a human, but some of them still have some basic underlying concepts, right? So that is what he's saying, all these concepts have to first come. So that is the formation of that with the various gods associated with it. So soham cha triguna kramathe, comma, tribidhatam asadya, you can break at that ma, tribidhatam asadya vaikariko, comma, bhuyas taijasa tamasaviti bhavan. So you'll have an in and a na. So you first put an in, bhavan, comma. Next one starts with the adhyena sattvatmana. Soham cha trigunakramat trividhatam asadhya vaikariko bhuyastaijasatamasa bhavan adhyena sattvatmana.
सोऽहं च त्रिगुणक्रमात् त्रिविधतामास्यद्य वैकारिको भूयस्तेजसतामासाविति भवन्न आधेन सत्त्वात्मना. सोऽहं च त्रिगुणक्रमात् त्रिविधतामास्यद्य वैकारिको
Bhuyastejasa.
Oh, okay. Bhuyastejasatamasavita bhavan आद्येन सत्त्वात्मना. Sujata is out. I think.
Okay. Anyone else wants to cover for her? Just go ahead. Doesn't matter. Ram Pandrela Pango.
सोऽहं च त्रिगुणक्रमात् त्रिविधताम् आसाद्य वैकारिको भूयस्तैजसतामसौ इति भवन् आद्येन सत्त्वात्मना. सोऽहं च त्रिगुणक्रमात् त्रिविधताम् आसाद्य वैकारिको भूयस्तैजसतामसौ इति भवन् आद्येन सत्त्वात्मना.
And the tam asau iti when it joins, it becomes tamasa viti.
तामसा அது எப்படி இது?
See, do you have it as tam asau iti? Do you have it broken that way?
It says tamasau iti.
Yeah. So and the au and e becomes tamasa viti.
Tamasa viti. Okay.
The va gets introduced when that au comes.
Okay.
Yeah, tamasa viti. Thank you.
Can I read?
Yeah, go ahead, Sujata Garu.
Yeah. सोऽहं च त्रिगुणक्रमात् त्रिविधतामासाध्य वैकारिको भूयस्तैजसतामसाविति भवन् आद्येन सत्त्वात्मना. सोऽहं च त्रिगुणक्रमात् त्रिविधतामासाध्य वैकारिको भूयस्तैजसतामसाविति भवन् आद्येन सत्त्वात्मना.
Devan Indriya Manino Krita. That's one word. Devan Indriya Manino Krita, comma. Disha Vatarka Pashyashvino, comma. Vannindrachuta Mitrakan Vidhu Vidhi Sri Rudra Sharirakan. So it talks about each of the gods of it. So Agni is, which is Vanni, which is saying that. So Agni, who is the god of speech. Indra is the god of hands, the concept of the hands and the actions that comes there. The Vishnu is of the legs. Mitra is of all the excretion, and Prajapati is for reproduction. So it talks about each of these gods who are responsible for each of this karmendriyangal. Devanindriyamani no krita disha vatarka pashyashvino vannindra chutamitrakan viduvide Sri Rudra Sharirakan.
Devanindriyamani krita.
I think Sujata vandutta. So Usha.
Oh, sorry.
देवानिन्द्रियमानिनो कृत दिशावातार्कपाश्यस्विनो वन्निन्द्राच्युतमित्रकान् विधुविधि श्रीरुद्रशारीरकान्. देवानिन्द्रियमानिनो कृत दिशावातार्कपाश्यस्विनो वन्निन्द्राच्युतमित्रकान् विधुविधि श्रीरुद्रशारीरकान्.
देवानिन्द्रियमानिनो कृत दिशावातार्कपाशश्विनो वन्नीन्द्राच्युतमित्रकान् विधुविधि श्रीरुद्रशारीरकान्. देवानिन्द्रियमानिनो कृत दिशावातार्कपाशश्विनो वह्नीन्द्राच्युतमित्रकान् विधुविधि श्रीरुद्रशारीरकान्.
We'll do one more and stop today. भूमन्मानसबुद्ध्यहङ्कृतिमिलच्चित्ताख्यवृत्त्यन्वितं तच्चान्तःकरणं विभो तव बलात् सत्त्वांश एवासृजते जातस्तैजसतो दशेन्द्रियगणः तत्तामसांशात् पुनः तन्मात्रं नभसो मरुत्पुरपते शब्दो जनित्वद्बलात्. So like we said, Mahat Ahankaram and everything in there, and from there, from the Sattva Guna of it comes the Karmendriyangal and the Jnanendriyangal that we saw earlier, the 10 things. And then from the Rajas aspect of it, from the Sattva Guna, the mind comes, and the Rajas, the other things comes. Then the next thing which begins to come is Shabdam, the concept of sound. And unfortunately, the meaning of this goes into the next stanza. But the sound it becomes the essence of space. So this is going to talk about how sound comes, and then you have space, you have fire, you have water, you have the panchabhutams. These panchabhutams also form in a certain sequence, and the sequence of which the panchabhutams form build upon each other, right, on the characteristics, and that comes in the next stanza, so we'll cover it there. But the first one which gets formed in that is a concept of sound, which forms the essence of the space, that one of the panchabhutas of space. So that is the first thing which gets formed. So bhuman manasa buddhyahankriti, buddhi ahankriti, buddhyahankriti, milach chittakya vrityanvitam. So that line is continuous, comma. Tachantaha, put a tachantah karanam vibho tava balat, comma. Satvamsha eva srijat. भूमन्मानसबुद्ध्यहङ्कृति मिलच्चित्ताख्यवृत्त्यन्वितं तच्चान्तःकरणं विभो तव बलात् सत्त्वांश एवासृजत्.
भूमन्मानसबुद्ध्यहङ्कृतिमिलच्चित्ताख्यवृत्त्यन्वितं तच्चान्तकरणं विभो तव बलात् सत्त्वांश एवासृजत्. भूमन्मानसबुद्ध्यहङ्कृतिमिलच्चित्ताख्यवृत्त्यन्वितं तच्चान्तःकरणं विभो तव बलात् सत्त्वांश एवासृजत्.
भूमन्मानसबुद्ध्यहङ्कृतिमिलच्चित्ताख्यवृत्त्यन्वितं तच्चान्तःकरणं विभो तव बलात् सत्त्वांश एवासृजत्. भूमन्मानसबुद्ध्यहङ्कृतिमिलच्चित्ताख्यवृत्त्यन्वितं तच्चान्तःकरणं विभो तव बलात् सत्त्वांश एवासृजत्.
जातस्थैजसतो dashendriya ganaha. So that is there, remove it, put visarga comma, ganaha. Tattama samshat punaha, again visarga comma. Next line is goes away. Tanmatram nabaso marut purapate, comma, shabdojani twadbalat. Jatastajasato dashendriya ganaha tattama samshat punaha tanmatram navaso marut purapate shabdojani twadbalat.
जातस्तैजसतो दशेन्द्रिगणः तत्तामसां षत्वनः तन्मात्रं नभसो मरुत्वरपते शब्दो जनित्वद्भलात्. जातास्तैजसतो दशेन्द्रियगणः तत्तामसां षत्वनः पुनः
Tattama samshat punaha.
तत्तामसां सात्पन पुनः, but there is no shat punah. Okay.
What do you have there? You have punaha, right?
Punaha.
Again, later,
Yeah, punaha. Sorry. तन्मात्रं नभसो मरुत्पुरपते शब्दो जनित्वद्भलात्. Can you go one more time?
Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
जातस्तैजसतो दशेन्द्रियगणः तत्तामसां सात्पनः पुनः तन्मात्रं नभसो मरुत्पुरपते शब्दो जनित्वद्भलात्. Thanks.
जातस्तैजसतो दशेन्द्रियगणः तत्तामसां सात् पुनः तन्मात्रं नभसो मरुत्पुरपते शब्दो जनित्वद्बलात्. जातस्तैजसतो दशेन्द्रियगणः तत्तामसां सात् पुनः तन्मात्रं नभसो मरुत्पुरपते शब्दो जनित्वद्बलात्.
Krishnaya Parabrahmane Namaha. We'll stop here. We won't be able to complete the main incarnation this class, but we'll do it in the next class. Sandhanandhavabodhatmakamanupamitam कालदेशावधिभ्यां निर्मुक्तं नित्यमुक्तं निगमशतसहस्रेण निर्भास्यमानम् अस्पष्टं दृष्टमात्रे पुनरुरुपुरुषार्थात्मकं ब्रह्मतत्त्वं तत्तावद्भाति साक्षात् गुरुपवनपुरे हन्त भाग्यं जनानां कायेन वाचा मनसेन्द्रियैर्वा बुद्ध्यात्मना वा प्रकृते स्वभावात् करोमि यद्यत् सकलं परस्मै नारायणायेति समर्पयामि. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rajesh.
Thank you, Ji.
Thank you, Andy.